Hello, family, and welcome back or welcome to my channel, a Woman's Heart Podcast, your go-to destination for exploring faith, inspiration, health, and personal growth. Today, we're honored to have a true champion for well-being joining us. She is passionate about education. She's a dynamic speaker. She's a professional development powerhouse dedicated to helping you cultivate resilience and thriving in the workplace. So keep watching so you can get your blessing. All right, Hi, and welcome back to Woman's Heart Podcast, a wellness podcast where we'll explore faith, inspiration, health, and personal growth. Today, we're joined by Vimbo Watson. We'll be diving into a topic that touches us all: building resilience and finding a well being amidst the demands of life. Our guest today is a true advocate for thriving and not just surviving. She's a former elementary principal who now empowers individuals and organizations to cultivate positive culture, prioritize self-care, and recover from burnout. Her dedication to wellness in her community earned her the title of AFI 2025 Washington Navy Yard Spouse of the Year. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes.
Awesome. Congratulations on that. And so we're so happy to have you. We're going to be inspired by you. We know you're going to share a little bit about your journey and your practical strategies for healthier, more vibrant you. So welcome to the show, Venmo.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. I'm so
And we're
excited.
excited that you're here. And we love the fact that you have taken time out of your busy schedule to give us a little bit of your heart. So let's just jump right on in. Uh, can you share for us who you are and what makes you get up in the morning?
Yes, absolutely. So I'll share a little bit about my background and what makes me Vimbo. With a name like Vimbo, you might guess I'm not from around here.
Yeah, where are you
Uh,
from? Where are you from?
yeah, so I was born in Zimbabwe. Vimbo is a
Hmm.
Zimbabwean name. It actually means faith or
Hmm.
fortitude or strong hope.
I
So
love it.
I love that my parents decided to name me that. But so I was born in Zimbabwe, but we moved to the Midwest when I was just 2 months old. So I was a little baby growing up in the Midwest of the United States. I grew up in a very small town with two stoplights. But even though I was in a small town, we were right next to a very international university.
Mhm.
And so I always grew up in an environment of children and families and people who looked and spoke and thought differently than me. It was a very ethnically diverse, a very just intellectually diverse environment to grow up in. And I think a lot of that is what shaped who I am even now as an adult
Mhm.
and kind of made me a very curious child, even from a very young age. So I reflect on my upbringing a lot and think about just like, wow, like even though I grew up in a very, middle of the Midwest, like
Mhm. Mhm.
small town, like I said, with just a couple stoplights, I
Yeah.
was still exposed to a little bit of the world from a very young age. So,
So
yeah.
that's beautiful. So what gets you up in the morning?
So, what gets me up in the morning? Well, I will say, and this has been true of me for as long as I can remember, I love people. I love connecting with people. I am an extreme extrovert. So, I really love connecting, whether it's meeting up with a friend or someone who is a new friend.
Right.
Um, I am very embedded in a lot of our local military community organizations. And so, getting to go to different events but not just meeting up with people or, the excitement of, oh, yeah, I get to meet with a friend or maybe a new person, but
Mhm.
also hearing people's stories. I
Yeah.
think
Mhm.
there is such power in when we sit down and listen to either where someone has come from or even just what they're going through right now. I just know that it doesn't matter who I'm talking to, you can always find something you have in common with someone, and you can always learn something from someone else as well. And I so believe in the power of education, the power of learning from other people. So that's what gets me up in the morning is just figuring out, okay, whose story can I learn about, today, whether it's meeting someone in person or reading a book, like what new thing can I learn about today? That's what gets me
Mhm.
going.
That is so good. I love that. It sounds too, where we know of people, but we really don't know people until we connect with them. So it sounds like you're a people connector as well. You just like connecting with folks and being able to hear a little bit about them so you can connect even more, go deeper.
Yes, absolutely. Because what I realized is I think I've been inspired by other people who I've seen, oh man, you have a really good gift for connecting people who, are interested in a certain topic or are passionate about a certain cause. And once I started to realize, wait a second, I also know people who are focused on certain things in my own network. And
Yeah.
how can I connect to those people? I think, there's a lot of negative stuff to say nowadays about social media, and it does have its
Yes,
downfalls.
it
But
does.
one positive thing is that I have discovered it does make it easier to bridge people, even people who are far apart physically,
Yeah.
who might be going towards the same purpose and working on the same goals.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, I do like connecting people for
I
sure.
love that. So when you say using social media, do you use your Instagram or is it LinkedIn that you connect people through?
I would say the most powerful platforms I found lately are LinkedIn and Threads. So I used to be years ago, I was very active on platforms like Twitter and even
Mhm.
Facebook back in the day when people actually still talked to each other
Yeah.
more on that. But I have found for sure LinkedIn, in a lot of just different spaces I'm in, it tends to be the platform people use a lot.
Yeah.
And something I found handy about LinkedIn as well is it's a place where you can post longer form content.
Yes.
You can say an entire story. You don't necessarily have to just put a sentence because it is one of those platforms where statistically people just read more
Mhm.
and they are more interested in getting the full story. So LinkedIn has been a great connecting point. And then also Threads, just speaking and I like Threads because it feels a little bit less formal than other platforms. So
Mhm.
I still show up as myself, like the professional I am. But
Mhm.
even, just I think earlier this week I posted something about just driving through my city and the beauty I saw and just the fact that I'm in awe of the historical nature of the buildings I'm surrounded by. And
So
that got a lot of feedback from Threads. So I like social media where you can have a conversation. And so LinkedIn and Threads. Those are my current
you
favorites.
use social media, you don't let social media use you because so many people are so drawn in and so
Right.
zoned out. But it sounds like you leverage it the way it should be leveraged, right?
Yes, yes. I've heard someone say it this way, and I like to like I hope I embody this, but they say, let's make social media social again. And so that is my aim when I get on social media, even if I'm connecting with someone virtually or digitally, I
Mhm.
want to take our relationship offline and somehow convert it to in real life. So
Yeah, I
that
love
tends
that.
to be my goal a lot on social media.
Yeah, awesome. So you are that people connector. So I'll remember that about you, that you are definitely that. And I could tell when we first met, just you very bubbly, just love talking to everyone, listening in to their stories. So it shows. It definitely it comes across. So
Thank
that's
you.
really amazing. So Vimo, your journey from elementary principal to leading workshops on burnout recovery is really compelling to me. So can you share a pivotal moment or experience from your times as a principal that truly highlighted the need for greater focus on well-being in a professional setting?
Yes, absolutely. So I will say I worked as a teacher prior to being a principal,
Mhm.
and transitioning into the admin role was certainly not easy. I'm sure any school principal would tell you
Yeah.
this. I had the book knowledge, I had the head knowledge, I had the okay, I know how to be a leader on paper,
Mhm.
but there's what you think you would do when you're in a leadership position, and then there are the things you sometimes do to survive,
Right.
especially the learning curve.
Right. That's
Just being
real. That's a
honest.
real
Yeah,
thing. Right.
yeah, just being honest, you have to
Mhm.
survive the learning curve into the positions because there is really no manual for it. There's a lot you can learn that will help you,
Mhm.
but every school situation is unique. Every set of students, every set of parents, every set of staff. And so I know there are a lot of situations, especially my first year as admin, and I worked as a principal for 5 years. So
Mhm.
I remember distinctly my first year, I was driving home that fall. I had been out of town for the weekend, visiting friends, had a great weekend, great weekend off,
Yeah.
fully refreshed. I was like, okay, I'm ready to jump back into being a principal. I can do it this year. And as I'm driving home, I start to get a really terrible migraine. And it's so bad I had to pull over to the side of the road. My vision was blurring. I'd never had anything like this.
Right.
Vision blurring, my head is pounding, and I'm like, I don't understand why this, hour-long drive home is now suddenly becoming like a medical emergency. So
Right,
I
right.
pull over to the side of the road and I eventually am able to like take some drinks of water. I'm like,
Mhm.
this is the weirdest headache migraine I've ever had. I get home, I take the Monday off of work, and I end up going to see the doctor.
Mhm.
And they eventually recommended I get an MRI. And so I do the brain scan and everything. And when we have the follow-up call, I thought it was already a good sign because he said we can do it over the phone versus come back into the office. So I
Right.
thought, okay, so nothing super bad must be wrong. But, I had already Googled and WebMD'd every possible thing. And he calls me, and I heard these words I hopefully will never hear again in my life. But he said, Vimbo, I have to tell you, your brain is unremarkable. And I said, Sir,
What?
right. Now, medically, anyone listening will know medically that is actually amazing news. And that's exactly what you want to hear after a scan, that your
Right.
scans are unremarkable. But what he meant is he said there's no hemorrhaging, you don't have any brain bleed. He
Right.
said there is no tumor, there's no mass, you don't have cancer.
Mhm.
You are likely, he's like, there is nothing physically there that is happening to your brain.
Right.
You are likely just enduring a high amount of stress. Have you had any major life changes? And I
Mm.
thought, well, yeah, in the last few months, I have become a school principal. That was a major shift from being a classroom teacher.
Absolutely.
And so he said, yeah, you should really work on managing that. I mean, what is a brain doctor going to tell you except for like, go back to your primary care physician and
Right.
figure out a plan, right?
Yeah.
They've done their part. He's read the brain scan. And so that first year of being an administrator is when it hit me right in the face. A phrase I had heard years before from one of my former teachers in college, my nutrition teacher. He would
Mhm.
say this all the time. He would say, your body is keeping track whether or not you are. Your body is keeping track of what is happening, whether or not you are. Now, of course, he was talking about this with nutrition and whether or not you eat 10 brownies, your body is keeping track of those sugars and
Right.
that sugar, that calorie
Mhm.
count. But in my case, I came to realize in that first year as a principal, as I'm sitting on the phone with the doctor telling me your brain is fine, but I was like, but it's not fine.
Right.
It's
You
because
feel
my
not
body
fine.
was keeping track of this stress
Yeah.
and that dread as I was driving closer and closer back to that job that was causing me so much just stress, whether I was working or not working. And so even then I began a little bit that's what kind of planted the seed of me
Right.
wanting to learn how to better take care of my wellness and
Mhm.
my just myself as a human being. I know we throw around the term self-care and people are tired of it. They're like, "Oh, self-care. I don't want to hear about taking another bubble bath. I
Right.
don't
Right.
want to hear
Right.
about, I have to go on a $5,000 vacation to do
Right.
self-care."
Yeah.
Really, I can demystify it. Self-care is nothing more than just taking care of yourself in the same
Every
way we would
day.
talk
Every
every
day.
si-
Like and
every
every
single
day.
day. You can't skip it. In the same
Yeah.
way we would not drive in our car without gas in it because we know
Mhm.
that it would break down on the side of the road.
Right.
Yet so many of us don't fuel the activities that we're doing, and then we wonder why we break down on the side of the road. And
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
I definitely learned that the hard way. And that year, even in my first year, I was like, no, I can't wait until the third year to get out of survival mode. Even
Right.
now,
Right. Right.
I've got to figure out how here and now I can build into my day moments to breathe. I
Mhm.
can stop scheduling back to back to back to back to back to
Mm.
meetings.
That's important.
I
Yes.
can get out of that mode because I was so used to like, oh, if someone asks for something, I need to respond. And then I got to a point where I said, wait a second, as an administrator, you actually have a lot of control over your schedule from day to day, a lot of the
Right.
time. If you have a good team around you, if you have people supporting you as far as discipline and other things in the school,
Mhm.
you can decide whether you're going to take 10 meetings a day or you're going to take two scheduled meetings a day.
Mhm.
And those were the kind of decisions where I had to start saying, okay, what is urgent for the operations of the school? Like, what is going to keep our lights on? What is going to make sure our
Yeah.
students are
Yeah.
happy and healthy?
Right.
What is going to keep us in compliance with the state and the county and our district? And then what is just a nice to have, but I don't have the bandwidth for it right now. And
Right.
so that definitely fueled my journey as an administrator through the years, and then even the work I do right now, which is now I'm very passionate about, hey, burnout is a real thing.
Hmm.
Wellness is a real topic we need to talk about often and early before people reach burnout so
Right.
that we can help them navigate it better. So,
I think and thank you for your story and everything that you're doing to help others, because I think this burnout thing it catches up with you. You think you're not burnt out until you stop. And then you
yes.
recognize that you really were burnt out. Now, that happened to me when I was working in government contracting many years ago. And I recognized after I transitioned into working for self and, doing those things, I slowed down. And
Mhm.
I read this article that said, if you feel this, and this, then you had burnout. I was like, oh my gosh, I was burnt out that whole time because I felt it and I just didn't consider it to be burnt out. I kept going. It's like,
Yeah.
just keep going. And until I stopped, I didn't recognize that that's what it was.
Yes, absolutely. And I think one thing that's fascinating is I've been doing a lot of workshops recently and speaking
Mhm.
and even whether it's in school environments or for organizations or businesses,
Yeah.
one thing I think people find surprising when you really dig into the cycle of burnout itself
Mhm.
is you would think, oh man, if I was really burned out, I would just be like giving up. But actually, when you're deep in burnout, one really big indicator is that sometimes you are actually overperforming and you
Right.
are overworking
Yep.
and you are actually giving more, but you are feeling like you're not
Yes.
ever giving enough.
Exactly.
So,
That's what I felt like. It was like I'm pouring in and I'm doing all this, and I felt like I was not doing enough, but I still knew I was. So
yes,
that's a good thing.
exactly.
Yeah.
So it's good to teach people the ways to identify it because they
Mhm.
start disassociating with themselves and they start seeing themselves as like a shell of a person who,
Yeah.
okay, it's almost like you're watching your own life unfold because you see that you're going through the motions, you're working harder, but
Right.
you are feeling less and less connected to the work that you're doing.
Mhm.
And that's, I can just think of the educational space. That is such a dangerous place to be because if you talk to so many educators, almost any one of them could tell you their why, right? Like
Right. Right.
education is
Mhm.
one of those fields where people are so passionate. They got into it for a specific reason. Someone inspired them, something inspired them. But then when you get educators or even other professionals who are burned out, you start to lose focus of that.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
then that even just adds to the burnout even more because then you're asking yourself, why am I even doing this anymore?
Right.
Like,
But I love this, but why am I doing it?
but why am I doing
Doesn't
it?
match up.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
That's crazy.
exactly.
Well, thanks
Yeah.
for that answer, and recognizing that burnout is a real thing, and that you're now teaching people how to identify it, which is good, because if you don't know how to identify it, you don't know you're in it. So
Yes,
once
exactly.
you learn how to identify, you can step back and say, this is what I need to do to not be in burnout or to not hit a wall, because you could
Yeah.
hit a wall too. So this is good conversation. So you talk a lot about fostering a positive culture for organizations or schools that are currently struggling with low morale or high stress. What's an immediate actionable step they can take to start shifting toward a more positive and supportive environment?
So I can share even just from my own experience,
Mhm.
also what I've researched, also what I now teach.
Mhm.
I think the most powerful thing, so I'll come from two perspectives.
Okay.
One is the advice I would have for people who are in leadership position. And
Yeah.
then the other is just advice I would have for anyone who is in any profession or just wants to see the culture shift in any organization you're in. So,
Mhm.
from the leadership perspective, the most powerful thing you can do to improve and shift the culture in your organization is give people a real voice in the decision making mechanisms of your organization, your school, your business, whatever it is.
Right.
And that looks like a lot of different things. I'm going to give you an example in my own experience.
Mhm.
So, when I was a principal, I actually was a principal during the pandemic. During the height of the pandemic, our
Mhm.
school had to go virtual overnight as we were on spring break in March 2020. So, I
Mhm.
remember it very vividly. But the beauty of this was I was a principal. I was in year 3 of being a principal.
Mhm.
The beauty of this, and not that I'm not saying a pandemic is good. I don't want to be toxically positive. Like the pandemic was very, very bad for a lot of people.
Right.
There was something beautiful, though, that happened in leadership during that time. And what happened was I was hearing as a principal from my superintendents, from our educational leadership, that
Mhm.
we had a lot of freedom to do whatever we felt like we needed to do to support our staff.
Right.
And the
Right.
level of freedom I was given allowed me to meet with my staff. And we all decided a lot of what we did, and we were able to do this. We were a smaller school.
Mhm.
When you're working with, dozens of teachers versus hundreds or thousands, I get that it could be different.
Right. Right.
But we were a small enough staff where we sat down and we decided how we were going to get the materials to the students. We decided what a typical day would look like on virtual. We decided these things together. The beauty of doing that is that if you're an organization going through a rough time, you're going to have blowback, you're going to have criticism. But if you've all made the decision, as many decisions as you can make together, then what happens is your team actually becomes a team. And when you're facing difficult things, everybody is like, no, but we made this decision together. No,
Right.
but we're going to see this through because we made this decision together. Everything from like, if we were going to require masks coming back, we all sat down, we looked at the data, we were advised by different people. Like
Mhm.
we were informed, but allowing people to be in the decision process is I think even you can do this as a corporation. I think whenever I sit down with someone who's in leadership and they say, you don't understand, we can't do that. I'm like, but have you talked to your people?
Right.
Because
Right.
sometimes what you think they would be asking for, you think, oh man, if I opened the floodgates and I asked them what would make their day better or what would make their time working here better,
Right.
you might have ideas in your mind as a principal. I'm like, oh no, is everyone going to ask for like a month off? Are we all just so stressed from COVID? What ended up happening were we had some really great suggestions that ended up being very doable within our budget that made everybody feel better. People just wanted more paid planning time. So,
Yeah.
okay, can we hire an additional art teacher or an additional, can we have more hours for PE or different things so that the classroom teachers can have more time to plan? So that's just an example in my experience of like, if you want to improve your culture, there's a great book called The Multiplier Effect. I believe it's by Liz Wiseman. Yes, that's her name. And she wrote it with several other co-authors. The Multiplier Effect, it's called that. And it just talks about how the only way to multiply the impact of your organization is by delegating responsibility through processes, through conversations, but it starts by shared ownership. The most strong and resilient organizations and the ones with the healthiest cultures have shared ownership of as many decisions as possible. You can't decide about everything. I was a principal. We had to be in compliance with the
Mhm.
state and the government and everything. But the things that you can, you decide together. And then on the flip side, my advice to someone who's in an organization where you feel like, hey, this isn't the healthiest organization, I think there are a couple of things you can do. I think the first thing I would say, coming from a leadership perspective, is don't underestimate the power of your voice as
Mm.
an employee.
Right. Right.
Change almost always comes, like effective, long lasting change, just from what I've seen, typically comes from the bottom up. And it comes from someone saying, hey, like, do we have processes for XYZ? Like, can we be more efficient in XYZ?
Mhm.
And it comes from that coming together. And so I would say, like, to the degree that you can, start having conversations with people you trust in leadership. Or even if you don't trust them in leadership, just start saying, hey, how can we start having conversations about whatever the case is, about how we treat people with their time off requests, about our processes for XYZ. I found it's the little things. You can't always pay people 100, 200, $300,000 a year each per position. You can't always increase salary, but
Right.
sometimes the little things you're doing are actually making people either like you and the organization more or less. And
That's
there are little things you can often change that help people feel better about where they work. So just my 2 cents about all of it.
That's great wisdom. Thank you. And that makes
Yeah.
it resonates with me because I think when you were speaking, I was thinking high level is people will help support what they help build. So if you
Yes.
allow them to speak into it, then they're going to help support it along the way. So now it's a collective as
Yes.
opposed to individually you as a leader saying we're going to do it this way and that's the way we're going to do it and nobody has any input.
Yes.
You get a lot of pushback there. And then I think it's important to allow people to be valued, seen, and heard. I always say that
Hmm.
because that's the key right there. When anybody asks, well, how would you approach this problem with employees and how do you bring people together? Using emotional intelligence and allowing people to be who they are, but bringing that whole lens of allowing them to be valued, seen, and heard makes them perk up. It's like,
Yes.
okay, I want to share my voice and because I feel like I'm being valued, and I'm being seen and they're listening to what I'm saying. So it makes a big difference, a huge difference. So
Absolutely.
yeah, thanks for that answer. That was such a great answer. So you talk a lot about that where we start where you foster, but then also in terms of self-care after it gets a bad rap, of course, because we talked about it's like self-care. No one wants to hear about it anymore. Taking $5,000 vacations, we're going to the spa, we're taking bubble baths, we're doing all of that. Sometimes it seems like it's a luxury rather than a need.
Hmm.
And I think because again, it's we talk about it so much now because we do need it, but we need to do it every day in different ways. So from your perspective, how can a busy professional, especially those in demanding fields, integrate self-care into their routines without feeling like it's just one more thing they have to do?
Right. So I would say definitely start small.
Okay.
So two things I would encourage a busy professional to focus on is to one, start small, and I'll dig into that in just a second. But the second point I would have is focus on how your day starts. We
Mm-hmm.
often, no matter what profession you're in, we often tend to have more control over the start of our day versus how our day ends. So it doesn't matter whether you work in corporate, even whether you are, I mean, I sometimes speak to burned out stay-at-home moms. Like
Yeah.
I speak in a lot of, I just spoke for a local military spouse club here
Mhm.
in the area, and a lot of those women, they may not be working in a professional setting, but they may be burned out from staying at home with their kids and cleaning up messes and things like that.
Mhm.
Still, even in that case, you tend to have more control over the start of your day. Now, I'll say this in like a not shaming way because I don't know that it's very much so possible for every person to wake up at 5 a.m. I know there's a big movement and there are tons of books. Like you can Google, there is a big 5 a.m. movement, and that is just not necessarily for everyone. But if I were talking to someone who right now is struggling in the dregs of burnout, my advice to them, like my first step for them would be if you could start your day half an hour earlier,
Mhm.
what could you do in that? I'm not talking about an hour. I'm not saying start at 4 or 5 a.m. I'm saying if you wake up at 6, can you wake up at 5:30? Or if you wake up at 7, can you wake up at 6:30? What can we put in there that we know research is going to show us starting small is going to help improve your outlook? And so some of those things like the start small advice I have for people is okay, I know gratitude radically changes the brain. Harvard has done multiple studies. I think the most recent one I saw was 2019, but I'm sure they've done one sooner or more recent about gratitude. And they took
Oh yeah.
participants,
You
they
see.
wrote down 3 unique things that they were grateful for every single day for 6 weeks, and it permanently changed their brain. So
Mm-hmm.
what this tells us is just 6 weeks, and I've done this for, I mean, I've been journaling, I don't even know how many years at this point. I am a big proponent of journaling, but
Mm-hmm.
even I will meet people who say, "Oh, I hate sitting down and writing." For whatever reason, they don't like writing. I'm like,
Right.
technology is here to help us. If you must, take your phone and open up your notes app and click the microphone button and speak into your phone 3 things you're grateful for. Like, I don't want anyone to have any excuse. I know someone who keeps a note on their phone that
Mm-hmm.
says, good things are always happening to me. And they're listing 3 things every day when they're standing in line at Michael's, when when
Wow.
they're out shopping, when they're out at a restaurant waiting for their order. They take out their phone and do 3 things. So yes, I think 30 minutes in the morning would be ideal, but don't let that advice restrict you from taking this advice of being grateful every day. Find
Right.
a way to reflect on gratitude every day. That's a small step, at
Mhm.
least three things.
Mhm.
Um, there is research that shows Simon Sinek, he is a author.
Motivational
He called
speaker. Yeah,
yes,
I know
yeah.
him.
He is
Yeah.
a very great he's a great thinker in this space about optimism.
Yeah.
And he talks about how there's research that shows that speaking to a friend for just 8 minutes, if you are in a really bad mental state, like if you've gone through something very frustrating, and
Yes.
mind you, like this is not talking about like trauma. If there is like this is my disclaimer to say, like, if you have experienced something traumatic, if you are processing really heavy things, please always seek out like licensed medical professional help.
Right. Right.
That is also self-care. So yes, that is absolutely that. If you are not in a like crisis state and you're just looking for a way to practice self-care, then calling a friend for 8 minutes and venting and talking about something frustrating, just 8 minutes
Mhm.
is enough to take your brain and your neural pathways that were spiraling into like the world is ending, everything, woe is me,
Right.
and to put you on a path that is able to reframe the rest of your day. Just 8 minutes. So when I talk to someone who's like a busy professional and they're like, I don't have time for 5 hours of self-care or I don't have time for a vacation, I'm like, that's actually good because the truth is, if you are burned out, a vacation is not going to fix it. What
Right.
is going to fix it is your day to day. Okay, yeah, maybe you are just in a profession where you are in meetings from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. or 4 p.m. and there's no way of getting around it. But on your drive to work, can you call your mother? On your drive home from work, can you call your best friend?
Exactly.
When you get home, can you tell your partner three things you're grateful for?
Mhm.
After dinner, can you just take a 10-minute walk and get your brain, your body, your heart pumping, the little things. My biggest advice for self-care is don't don't get sold into this idea that it has to be expensive
Yeah.
and that it has to take hours. You can do self-care. You can care for yourself in as little or as 5 or 10 minutes, and it can radically change your mindset for the entire day. That would be my advice for someone
That's great
struggling.
advice. And I'm glad you said that. That is rewiring the way you think when you do that. Those neurons are shooting off. They're
Yes.
shooting off. They're taking your brain in a different direction because a lot of times the way we think, our mind is in a groove. You have to
Hmm.
find a way to get out of the loop. And those
Yes.
suggestions you gave help to get out of that loop, which is
Hmm.
excellent. Excellent answer. Thank you so much. And so, I want to ask this question because you were the AFI 2025 Washington Navy Yard Spouse of the Year. So you've clearly made a significant impact in your community. So how has your experience of advocating for wellness within the military community informed your broader approach to resilience and well-being in a professional context?
Well, I will say the
Wonderful.
military community is its own unique community, just as many other communities are. Um, we as a military family face unique challenges, as probably a lot of people are aware that military families tend to move every few years. They tend to face a lot of challenges if the service member is on deployment or out of the house, especially once you start talking about families with kids. There are just unique challenges. I will say this goes back to what I was saying at the beginning, which is that I found that we all have a lot more in common than we have that's different.
Mhm.
And so as a newer military spouse, I thought, oh my goodness, the challenges in this community must be like so different than everything else I've known, as an educator, as a human, as a person, living here in the United States. But surprisingly, a lot of the challenges are very similar to what other communities experience. They just might be to a larger extent because you're experiencing them in the military service, right? So, for example, when it comes to education, and a lot of the work I do in the military community is helping families access resources for
Mhm.
education for their children.
Mhm.
Because if you're moving a lot and your child, for example, has like a learning plan because they maybe struggle with learning for whatever reason, there are resources provided specifically for military families, understanding that they are sacrificing stability of living in the same place for our nation's defense. And so a lot of what I do is sharing resources with people.
Mhm.
Um, and a lot of the challenges I face are similar to challenges that are outside of the military community, which is like a lot of times the resources are there, people just don't know how to access them. And
Mhm.
because people are busy and because people, don't have money for a housekeeper and a maid and a cleaner, so, the parents are doing all of the work in the home, they don't have time to go and research, okay, how can I get these resources for my kids? So a lot of what I have done is just trying to, if I meet someone and I know that they're military specifically, I
Mhm.
will be like, oh, did you know that there is this resource? And
Yeah.
every other time someone will say, oh yeah, I knew about that resource. I
Mhm.
got connected with that when I moved in town. But
Right.
every other time someone will be like, oh, I didn't know that there was a
Mhm.
local homeschooling community, or there was a local
Mhm.
community of military families that all go to this school in the area, or that I could access this, or that legally by law, this school has to provide me this accommodation, even though we moved mid-year, right? Like
Right.
there are things people don't know because they just don't have the time to resource it. So I do think it's helped me realize even more so, whether it's working with my military community or working with other people and advising and consulting as an educational consultant, just in general,
Mhm.
just realizing a lot of the times the resources are there. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. It's helping people access, lowering the barriers to access the resources that already exist that are meant to help and uplift and, provide more equitable services for that. Oh, yeah.
Excellent. I'm glad that you're helping, you're there as a beam of light to help
Thank
those who
you.
don't know. Because, like you said, some people know, some people don't, to get access to it, and finding the resource, then get access to it is two different things, right?
Yes. Yes.
Understanding how to get access to it, because okay, now I know this thing, so what do I do next? And that
Yes.
leads me to this next question for you. With you've given us some really great advice on organizational burnout and how to kind of move in that space. What would you say to someone who feels like they're on the verge of burnout? And what would
Mm.
it be that the first tangible thing they need to do to start recovery? Because you gave us
Okay, that
other really great advice and wisdom. If someone was listening in and they were like, I think I might be in burnout, what's the next step for them? Step
I
back.
love, yeah, I love this question and I love the perspective of we need to step back and figure out what do we do when we are in triage mode? What do we do when, we're in urgent care or emergency room mode versus just the run of the mill self-care and wellness, right?
Mhm.
So I use this analogy because I think it's so important to think about our mental health in the way that we think about our physical health.
Mhm.
I know for me, years ago when I was a kid, I broke I fell off my bike, I fractured my elbow, and I had to wear a cast for the rest of the summer.
Mhm.
And that cast impacted everything. I wasn't able to write with that hand. I couldn't go to camp. I couldn't go swimming because I couldn't swim with the cast.
Mhm.
I couldn't, my family would go to a theme park to Six Flags every summer. I couldn't ride on any of the roller coasters because I had a cast. I don't know that we always treat our mental injuries the same way we treat our physical injuries. In fact, I think we under react to them.
Right.
So if I was sitting down, which I have been, and I have people I even coach, when I sit down with someone and they are finally ready to say, take the step and say, I'm either already burned out or I'm about to be burned out, Vimbo, help me please. My first thing is to look at their schedule. Like
Mhm.
we sit down and we look at your schedule and we say, okay, here's the thing. If if you were somehow physically incapacitated, if you got the flu, you wouldn't
Right.
be able to go to work for the next week, right?
Exactly.
So let's treat this like a brain, thing that's really going on that we really need to address. I know you think everything in your schedule is essential, but let's stop and let's go into emergency mode and let's see what is actually essential for you to keep doing right now
Mhm.
and where can we pause and create space in your schedule for you to now insert these other wellness and I always start with like, okay, what can you do physically?
Mhm.
Like because that tends to be the first thing that leaves the plate as soon as somebody is burned out and stressed and overwhelmed and work is really taking everything. The first thing that goes out of the window is their 30-minute, yoga class or their one
Yeah,
hour
the thing you need.
strength training. The thing
Right.
that you actually need for your brain to be able to process the mental stress is the physical activity that you can do.
Mhm.
And so that's the very first thing I say is like, think of this as if you don't process your stress is going to start processing you and like
Exactly.
breaking you down. And
Right.
so let's proactively say, okay, I know it's about to be, warm weather, whatever season you're going to. It could be fall, it could be winter. I know it's about to seem like a busy season, but what can you step back from right now and say, I will pick this up maybe in a month
Hmm.
when I've had a time to reassess, even if this fits into the season of life that we're in. And I'll tell you something I found that's really fascinating. Person after person I've worked with, a lot of the times the things we take off of the plate stay off the plate because they had no business being there in the first place.
Right.
Because a lot of us get caught up in things we commit to in different seasons of our life no longer fit in this season of our life. What you could do as a single person, you may not have the capacity and bandwidth for as a married person with 4 kids. Like
Right.
I'm using extremes on purpose to illustrate that like our capacity is different in different seasons and
Mhm.
it doesn't make you a bad person. It just means you can't always be the yes man or the volunteer person in every season of your life for different things, even if you care about them. So that would be my first piece of advice. And you can do that. You don't even need to necessarily sit down with a coach. A coach is better for accountability, but
Mhm.
you as a person can sit down and say, okay, if besides work, I cut out most everything else I was doing, what could I do for myself that would help me feel more like myself again?
Yeah.
And that looks different for every person, but it's worth thinking about and it's worth exploring.
I love that. I think too, as you were speaking about, I'm thinking boundaries, right? Putting those
Yes.
boundaries where, and I'll do this. I love to paint. So I had my whole day scheduled out last Saturday, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that, and I'm gonna get back to painting because I hadn't done it in a couple of weeks. And all these other things start to pop up, right? Well, can you go do this? Can you do it? And I said no to all of that. And I really stuck to my guns. And I was so glad that I did because in the past I would have said, well, I can do that later. I'll just paint later. But painting is like it brings me closer to my mom because she was real creative.
Hmm.
And I recognize that when I do paint, it's a connection,
Hmm.
and I love it. And I was like, I'm not giving that up. That's something that
Yeah.
you gotta hold on to, that it, whatever that thing is, that creative outlet will be for someone else. May not be painting, might be something else, but for me it's painting. And I stumbled on it late in life and I didn't even know I could paint, Vimbo. I was like, I found this out like going to a church's sit and paint, and then
Yes.
the world opened up of I didn't even know I could paint. This is so amazing. So
Yes.
it's funny because my youngest daughter keeps saying every time I paint something else, I keep painting. She's like, Mom, you're just getting better and better and better. And that just makes me feel so good. I'm like, well, thanks, Jade. I appreciate that.
No, that's awesome. And I would say, like, I love what you just shared right now because so much of the work I do is just encouraging people to stick to their boundaries and treat their appointments they have with themselves as
Mhm.
seriously as they would treat the appointments they have with other people. So
Mhm.
I think that is so powerful. And that's such a beautiful example of, yes, you made the painting appointment. I've been trying to do that with walking because I've really been trying, like, I know I feel better.
Yeah.
I just think clearer the more I walk. And we've invested in our second walking pad in our house, actually. So
So,
now we have a rule. We do this habit stacking of if we're sitting down to watch TV, I'll sit down for a couple minutes, but I've got to walk while I'm watching.
hey, that's
Or even in
awesome.
my office, yeah, if I'm doing something that I'm able to, I just found I feel so much better overall the more I move my body.
That's
But like you said, that looks different for everyone, and it's treating those appointments with ourselves with as much respect as we would treat it with our boss, right? Like an appointment with our boss, we would not cancel on an appointment with our boss. Let's not cancel on an appointment with ourselves.
Yeah, because we're the boss. I mean, we're the boss of ourselves, right? We
Yes,
tell
yes,
ourselves what we're
absolutely.
going to do. I mean, I feel like I am. I'm like, you know what? No one can verify, validate, certify, none of those things for me. I have to do that for myself. So understanding what that feels like in terms of not wanting to be burned out, and as an entrepreneur is more important because you don't do a strict 9 to 5. It's your days and weeks could look very different every day. So it's a process of understanding what it is you need for you and what that's going to make you feel like, right?
Yes,
And really
yes,
sticking to your guns. So that's been my thing. It's a journey though. It's like you have to do the work. You have to understand what that looks like and the habit of creating that discipline. And once that discipline is there, you now it's flowing into every aspect of your life. So I love that.
absolutely. Yes, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
This has been a great conversation, Vimbo. I would love for you to share your information with the audience. So if they want to further the conversation with you or reach out to you for resources or even talk with you about your services.
Yes, absolutely. So the great thing is I'm the only Vimbo I know. So hopefully I'm easier to
I love
I mean,
that. I'm the only, it's like Tigger.
yes, yes. It's not actually even a common name in Zimbabwe. So Vimbo, like Vimbo, it's not short for anything. Vimbo is my full first name. But
Mhm,
if you want to find me, I am available. So my website is vimbowatson.com.
mhm,
I'm also on all of the social media platforms. So on Instagram, it's at Vimbo Watson. On Threads, at Vimbo Watson. On LinkedIn, you can find me if you look up Vimbo Watson.
mhm,
If you want to email me, my email is hello@vimbowatson.com. And
mhm,
I would love to connect, like you said, provide resources, talk more about speaking, bringing interactive workshops or in-person speaking to your organization. I also do virtual as well. So yeah, I would love to share more about what I do. So feel free to reach out if you're listening here.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It's been such a great pleasure having you on the show. And I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to share your heart, your knowledge, and your wisdom with us. Thank you again.
Yes. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I appreciate it.
I love that you're an impact leader, not only, in your community, military community, but like in the world around you. So that's a huge, huge win for the world. So thank you.
Thank you.
So as we wrap up, if you've enjoyed our time together, remember to share, like, and comment and subscribe to the podcast. If you'd like to connect with me, you can reach me at voemetoday@gmail.com. And if you want to learn more about our services, resources, you can reach me at the website, voicesoфencouragement.com. And remember, our mission is to empower minds and transform lives. And as I always say at the end of every show, Ephesians 4:1